So before we start, we have to put things into context. In 1991, James Cameron gave us his Terminator sequel called Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and the movie was an absolute masterpiece in both scope and scale, along with its story and character growths and development, and would be hailed as one of the greatest action and science fiction movies of all time. Terminator 2 ended pretty conclusively, with the feeling that the Terminator story had now been told with everything wrapped up. And if a sequel ever did follow, it would have a damn near impossible task of living up to the perfection of the second movie. And so, as the 90s continued and then finished and the early 2000s started, it seemed that would never happen. However, in 2003, the impossible did happen, as there was a third Terminator movie called Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. Although James Cameron and Linda Hamilton had left the series, Arnold Schwarzenegger returned as the memorable Terminator cyborg, where this time a 20-something-year-old John Connor is depressed and lonely, living off the grid. Despite having stopped Judgment Day, he can sense that the terrible events of the future will catch up with him, where the TX Terminator arrives to execute vital members of the resistance of the future, where Arnie's T-101 model shows up to protect both John Connor and Kate Brewster, who would turn out to be John Connor's future wife and co-leader in the Resistance army against the machines. Although the movie has since been labelled as kind of meh, and a huge departure from the care and quality from James Cameron's previous two entries, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is now part of a lineup of third Terminator entries, attempts to continue the story after the second movie while ignoring other third entries. So the big question is, how does Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines hold up compared to other third Terminator entries? Has the passing of time and the release of not very good sequels proven that maybe Terminator 3 wasn't that bad after all? Or should the Terminator saga have been terminated when the credits rolled for the end of Part 2? Well, today we are going to try and find out as we look into 10 things that you didn't know about Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. Let's check it out. Number 10. The departure of Edward Furlong. So not only was Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines a departure for Terminator creator James Cameron and vital co-star Linda Hamilton, it also didn't see the return of the original John Connor himself, Edward Furlong, who played the role in Terminator 2 when he was just 12 years old. However, Furlong was originally intended to be in the third movie. In a recent panel, Furlong said that he was meant to be in Terminator 3, but was just partying too much at the time. And well, it's no secret that that stage of his life was a little out of control. However, Furlong was actually quite sad that he didn't return to the part. And he also said that he just couldn't go and see the movie, as he felt disappointed about not returning. But that said, he also praised Nick Stoll, who took over the part, and would go on to say that they are actually friends in real life and have even hung out several times. From that panel footage, Furlong seems like a pretty interesting guy. He says, yeah, you know man a lot, but he still has an interesting story to tell. Number 9. James Cameron was planning a third Terminator movie. After the release of T2, the Terminator brand went into something of an ownership fiasco, as there was a 50-50 ownership split between Corolco Pictures, who distributed Terminator 2, and James Cameron's ex-wife Gail Ann Hurd, with Corolco Pictures co-founder Mario Casar claiming to make a Terminator 3 sometime in the next 5 years as of 1992. However, Corolco Pictures went bankrupt, and James Cameron was then trying to pitch a Terminator 3 to 20th Century Fox, which is what led to the 1996 3D theme park attraction movie T2 3D, Battle Across Time, which actually reunited Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton and Edward Furlong all reprising their roles, with Cameron claiming that the short film was to be a stepping stone leading into the third movie. However, Cameron's interests then shifted to making Titanic instead. What followed were years of court cases and proceedings with all kinds of movie distributions and producers trying to buy rights and shares to making a third Terminator movie, putting it into production hell, until Mario Casar went forward with the sequel without the involvement of Cameron, with Warner Brothers and Columbia TriStar both distributing the movie. Number 8. Sarah Connor originally died halfway through T3. Although in T3 we got the return of Arnie's cybernetic Terminator, Sarah Connor is nowhere to be seen until halfway through, where it's discovered that the character had died in between movies of leukemia. However, in the original script, Sarah Connor was very much alive in the first part of the movie, till her character was to die midpoint in the film. This is actually what put Linda Hamilton off returning. As she said in her own words, she died halfway through, and there was no time to mourn her. It was kind of disposable, so I said no thank you. So yeah, with that, it sounds like Sarah Connor was going to have a real anticlimactic, lackluster death scene. Wow, that's almost as anticlimactic and lackluster as having her killed off-screen in between movies. Wait. Number 7. Schwarzenegger's insane demands for returning. So with Cameron out, Linda Hamilton out, and Edward Furlong out, T3's production really needed Arnold Schwarzenegger to return, to act as a link between the previous two movies and to make the movie profitable, of which his star power would have been able to achieve. To which, in order for him to return as the role of the Terminator, he was paid a whopping $29 million, and in addition to that, his requirements had to be met, including private jets, a built-in gym, personal bodyguards, along with 20% of the movie's ticket sale and DVD profits. And also, according to Gail Ann Hurd, he had to approve the script and director, of which the director was Jason Mostoll, who previously directed U-571, or is that U-571? I don't know, I haven't seen it, and would go on to direct Hancock. Yeah, they really spoiled Arnie to get him back behind the camera. I guess it shows just how much the movie's production needed him, and to be fair, he looks pretty good in T3, and it looks like he's hardly aged since T2. Number 6, the character of Kate Brewster was recast. It seems that not only was there problems in casting old characters from the franchise, but new characters as well, as we get Kate Brewster, the wife of John Connor, who would lead the resistance in the future after John's death, who was also the one who sent the reprogrammed T-101 into the past. The part was originally cast with actress Sophia Bush in the role. However, after several weeks of filming, director John Mostow felt that she looked too young and youthful for the role, despite trying to use makeup and camera angles to make her look older. So, with regret, he let her go from the movie. However, Claire Danes, who was offered the role before Bush but turned it down, was approached again, to which this time she accepted. Now, I really like Claire Danes, and have done ever since watching her in Romeo and Juliet. But I don't know, to me I always felt like her and Nick Stahl had no on-screen chemistry. And to me, their chemistry is actually an important part of the movie. To put things into perspective, just imagine if in the original Terminator movie there was no chemistry between Sarah and Kyle Reese. Yeah, that movie wouldn't have been as powerful. In addition to that, some of the actors considered for John Connor before Nick Stahl landed the role include Logan Marshall Green and Jake Gyllenhaal. Number 5. Casting of the TX. It was always intended for the villain Terminator in Terminator 3 to take on a human female form, which puts a new and interesting spin on the Terminator mythos. The number one choice for the role was Famke Janssen, who at the time was making waves due to her performance as Jean Grey in the X-Men. However, she didn't get cast, to which over 10,000 actresses auditioned for the role. And at one stage, after the huge popular success of The Fast and the Furious, it was even considered changing the sex of the villain and casting Vin Diesel in the role as the TX. However, Kristanna Loken came into audition, which literally just consisted of her walking down a hallway while looking threatening. And well, that was enough for her to get the job. To me, Loken is a highlight of the movie. She is menacing and threatening, and I feel like she's somewhat channeling Robert Patrick from T2, all while doing her own thing, and she is very convincing in all the action scenes, more so than Stahl and Danes in my opinion. And I think it's a shame her career never really took off after T3. Number 4. Ang Lee turned down directing T3. Before John Mostoll came on board as T3's director, several directors were considered to taking over the Terminator helm from James Cameron, and one of those directors even being Ang Lee, who turned down the job to direct Hulk instead. which incidentally was co-produced by James Cameron's ex-wife and producer of the first two Terminator movies, Gail Ann Hurd. And I am just really curious to know what Ang Lee's Terminator would have been like, so hopefully there's a parallel universe out there where that happened. Other directors considered include David Fincher, Roland Emmerich and Ridley Scott, all of whom turned T3 down. Number 3, the original script was slightly different. As we all know, T3 starts with the troubled and tortured John Connor, which, given what the character had seen in the previous film, makes sense, and even makes the character more tragic, in that he has this prophecy to fulfill despite not wanting it and being terrified of it. However, the original script started off with John Connor working for an internet company, which is vastly different from the wandering around aimlessly in fear approach that we ended up getting. And the villainous Terminator of the movie was called the T1G, who had the ability to turn invisible. But I guess it was felt having our main heroes running around fighting thin air wouldn't look very exciting. And let's not forget that cringy deleted scene where we see Schwarzenegger play an American officer called Sergeant Candy.
Hi! I'm Chief Master Sergeant William Candy,
whom the Terminator robots were going to be modelled after. Yeah, I guess I know why it's there. It explains why most of the Terminators all look like Schwarzenegger. But that voice that Arnie does for Sergeant Candy is just... ugh. Is it just me or does he sound like Forrest Gump?
I was honored to be selected by CRS.
I don't know about that accent.
We can fix it.
How cool would it have been if Skynet said, why don't we model our Terminators on the action movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger? That would have been a great twist. But then again, that means that Schwarzenegger would exist within the Terminators universe, which means that part 1 and 2 wouldn't really make much sense. Well, that shut me up. Number 2, music. To me, a huge letdown to Terminator 3 is the music. It's really lacking Brad Fiedel's powerful and distinct score that he composed for the first two movies. The second one in particular felt epic and gave Terminator its own unique sound. However, for Terminator 3, the score was composed by American composer Marco Beltrami. Now don't get me wrong, Beltrami is a great composer whose work shines through in movies such as World War Z and Logan. However, in T3, the music just sounds generic and like it could have been background music for any movie. Unlike Fiedel's score, where it was unique music that could only exist for Terminator movies. One thing that really bothered me was the famous Terminator theme wasn't played in the movie until the end credits. I mean, I couldn't believe it! Why wait till the end credits to hear that theme that everyone loves? The movie really could have done with the Terminator's powerful and moving theme to be played throughout the movie. Once again, just an opinion. Number 1. Release. So Terminator 3, the long-awaited sequel that took 12 years in the making, was released on July 2003, making $433 million in the box office on its $187 million budget. Although it didn't perform as well as Terminator 2, it was still a financial success, and the reception to Terminator 3 was, wait for it, actually pretty good. One of the people to give the movie praise was James Cameron himself, who labelled the movie as, quote, great. Whereas other critics like Roger Ebert would say that it's a silly action chase movie, but a very enjoyable one of that. It's in the recent years that followed when the dust started to settle and that Terminator 3's criticism started to rear their heads. Admittedly, the movie was never going to be as good as Part 2, but that was an impossible act to follow. There are criticisms about the more comical approach of the Terminator character, namely the talk to the hand line and the scene where he puts on those sort of Elton John looking sunglasses. But let's be honest, the comical aspect of the character started with the second installment really. After all, is the sunglasses scene really worse than the deleted smiling scene from T2? A terrible joke which would get passed on to Terminator Genesis. In my personal Terminator universe, the only stories that exist are Part 1 and 2, and everything else afterwards is just fan-made movies, including Terminator 3. But now that we live in a world with a ton of not-so-good Terminator sequels and third chapter attempts, I guess that what I do ask is, in hindsight, is Terminator 3 really all that bad? I can remember watching Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines in the theatre when it came out, and to be honest, I felt like it looked like that world we had seen in the first two movies. It felt like a Terminator movie, and I felt that as far as the spectacle of it goes, it lived up to the action and excitement of Part 2. So I was happy with the third movie. But back then, I was young. To me, it was more about hasta la vista, baby, than it was about no fate but what we make. But that said, as I've grown up over the years, I can see the issues with Terminator 3. Yes, it has the spectacle, but the intellectual elements and invested emotional stories are gone, making it feel like a hollow Terminator movie. And I think that's part of the problem. The movie seriously needed James Cameron's heart and wisdom. However, I would also stress that the end scene with the missiles taking off was beautifully filmed and almost poetic. It's both tragic but oddly uplifting at the same time, if that makes any sense. And once again felt like it could have been a conclusion to the series. So Terminator 3 is a fun popcorn movie that relishes the action aspect while skipping the heartbeat of the human one. Anyway, I'm Minty, and no matter what you say about Terminator 3, one thing you can't deny is that it takes a metallic dump all over Genesis. Seriously, that one was bad. See ya!